And good evening, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're watching from all over the world. My name is RJ Ledesma and welcome to my podcast, the RJ Ledesma Podcast. In this podcast, I interview the country's pioneering business personalities and entrepreneurs to learn more about how they think about business, what are their success secrets, and can we hack them for ourselves? How have they innovated their own businesses during this pandemic? But more importantly, what opportunities do they see emerging in the new normal, even the next normal? Is there a business personality or entrepreneur that you would like me to interview here on the podcast? Please do let me know. I would love to hear from them. I would love to pick their brains. Please drop me a message. We are also live right now on Kumu, CBRC TV, Global Pinas TV, and of course, the Bounce Back Network. Now, if you are enjoying this podcast and you are learning a lot from it, please subscribe and invite more friends to listen to the podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts, and other of the major podcasts players around the world and around the country. Now, with that, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, a very good friend of mine I'm having here on the show. And just a disclaimer, he's also my business partner as well. And you know what? During this pandemic, we've learned so much about how businesses have to evolve. But more importantly, I think the keyword is how businesses have pivoted during this new normal. And I think that our business together is one that has learned so much during this time. I'm looking forward to interviewing my good friend, Attorney Rocky Chan of EnterPH, which is a consultancy firm that helps foreign businesses establish their businesses here in the Philippines. And I want to find out from Rocky if this pandemic has been a boon or a bane for foreign companies who want to invest and set up businesses here in the Philippines. Has it improved? Has it lessened amidst this 2 years of pandemic here in the country? Have we become more or less competitive as a BPO or business process outsourcing area in the new normal? Attorney Rocky, again, is the president and co-founder of EnterPH. He is passionate about bringing success to the Philippines through foreign investments. EnterPH is a consultancy firm specializing in investor relations and helping companies conveniently establish an enterprise here in the Philippines. With that, please welcome my very good friend, Attorney Rocky Chan. Rocky, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much, RJ. Good to be here.
Thanks so much. It's
good evening and good morning or good afternoon to everybody else out there.
Well, thanks so much for joining us here, Rocky, right now. And let's really cut to the chase over here. Now, we were there when the pandemic hit, and we've been talking unceasingly since this pandemic hit, no? But really, the big question in people's minds, is with EnterPH, and we'll discuss about EnterPH in a bit and get into the company. Did many foreign companies who initially expressed an interest for coming in because in 2019 we had a deluge of foreign investments wanting to come into the country. A lot of BPOs, not just the large ones, but even the smaller ones, and other process outsourcing companies wanted to come here to the Philippines. And then the pandemic hits. And when the pandemic hits, there's limited mobility, there are travel restrictions. So, did a company like EnterPH, how did it fare during this pandemic? Are people still wanting, or are foreign investors, especially people who want to put up businesses here, did they stop during this pandemic?
Okay, so it's kind of a mixed bag, no? So the great thing about, I think I want to preface this by saying that the Philippines tends to actually do well when things around the world are not going so great. And we've seen this in the past 20, 25 years. So if you, I'm sure most of your listeners know that the Philippines is now the call center capital of the world. We've now outstripped India of that place. Okay, the dawn of the BPO industry and the call center industry happened during the Asian financial crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 1997 happened. Everyone around the world was looking to cut costs and to offshore services. So we started to take some of that load, right, from other countries across the world. And that became the genesis of our BPO industry.
I
Fast
see.
forward fast forward another 10 years, then the 2008 crisis happened, and that is actually when things started to really turn for us. So if you notice, from 2010 until maybe about 2018, 2016 to 2018, it was really a great run for the Philippines. And there was a trickle effect. It went cut across so many things. The markets were good, employment was up, more Filipinos had disposable income. We had a larger middle class, and that is attributed to the influx of foreign investment into the country. In fact, I believe it was either 2016, 2017, when foreign direct investment first outstripped OFW repatriations as our number one source of foreign exchange. I mean, nobody thought that that would ever be possible, right? Okay. So, with that as a context, the pandemic has been kind of a mixed bag, right? Because nobody expected this. And at the beginning, and I'm sure you know this, RJ, no, we've had constant meetings about this. It was scary, definitely for the first 4 months of the pandemic because nothing was moving, right? Um, con- Companies from abroad that expressed their intentions to come in 2020, that was definitely on hold. And like I said, we had really long conversations about this. We didn't have business for months, right? We had very little business for months. But even before things started to open up, right? When people were starting to accept the new normal, right, and the new way of doing things, a funny thing happened. We started to get more clients coming in. In fact, there seemed to be this larger sense of urgency, again, because all of these companies around the world need to cut costs, right? It's an unfortunate byproduct of the pandemic, but we as a country and we have become a very good destination for offshore work. And the great thing about it is, what I've noticed is, we are now not just a destination for your call centers, your inbound marketing, your outbound marketing. We're now we're slowly but surely becoming a hub for services that are higher up on the food chain or higher up on the value chain. And I think that's something that the country, and I'm not just talking about the private sector or the government sector, it has to be both, that we are poised to take advantage of. And we should kind of, rather than wait and ride the wave, we should already swim out to meet it, right? So we can talk a little bit more about that later. Sorry, RJ.
That's with the upskilling and reskilling also of our, I guess, the people working in that
Absolutely,
industry.
yes.
But before we get into that one, I want to. It's a really great story that you're telling right now. I enjoy the narrative of where we're taking it. But maybe there's two questions which I think arise first in the minds of people. No, number one is, why is the Philippines good for cost saving? Maybe like for me, we not, by now we intuitively understand why we are good for cost savings. But then,
Yeah.
why do countries see us as good for cost savings? What is it?
Okay.
What's the cost structure like?
Okay. So we are not the cheapest around, and I always want to dispel that myth, right? That countries, they come here, yes, to cut costs, but we are not the cheapest around. There are a lot of things that are expensive here in the Philippines. Real estate is expensive. Uh, Connectivity and power and utilities are expensive. Even labor costs have risen. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because you want that. You want that for a country, that the country is moving up in that direction. What I think we have started to understand, but we need to preach that gospel a bit more, is that we are a very good value proposition for other countries. All the things that makes the Filipino great as an OFW really does translate to having that workforce stay home. We our proficiency in English, our English literacy, obviously, our disposition when it comes to work, and just our natural disposition. We're willing to please. We are highly trainable. We are very adaptable, and we are, by and large, a very hardworking society. So these are the innate traits of the Filipinos that we have to harness in order for us to in order to take this country to the next level, right? And that is what other companies are seeing in us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Before, we used to be another option. We used to be the alternative to India, the alternative to an Eastern European country.
Mm-hmm.
But now we are the primary, sometimes we are the only
Really,
option
huh?
when it comes to countries. Yes, so that's one of the things that I've noticed with especially our recent clients. I would ask them, I mean, have you looked anywhere else, etc. And they said no. We really focused on the Philippines. I mean, there's really no point, right? That's the feedback that I'm getting. So I think that's something that we have to harness.
I'm very curious. What do they echo back to you, Rocky, when they say only the Philippines? Because it's because they've had previous experience working uh, with other BPOs, or know of other BPOs who've worked here. They have Filipinos working for them, or just by reputation alone, they say they want to bring their business to the Philippines.
Well, it's a fortunate byproduct of both, no? Many of them have had prior work experience in the Philippines or have met with companies that do work in the Philippines. Sometimes, honestly, it's as random as because they have this Filipino friend or this set of Filipino friends in the country that they're from, and when they talk to them, this is the impression that they have of Filipinos. So it is a very fortunate byproduct of the Filipino diaspora, right? So
Wow.
we're everywhere. And because our innate nature is very infectious, it's definitely something that foreigners take notice of, and something that they are looking for when it comes to a destination.
And having said that, Rocky, you said we've been, and I know we will talk about this later on. That your background before EnterPH is that you were also helping incorporate a lot of these foreign companies coming to the Philippines. And what have you seen also? And this gets also to the pandemic story. What has been the evolution of them coming in? Like you said, no, initially everybody was coming here just to do. I wouldn't call it low level work, but it's a different type call center, which is, I guess, where you have to develop different accents, and we were highly trainable to develop different accents because it's very neutral. Sabi nga nila, the Filipino accent is the sexiest accent, right? But anyway,
Right.
where did it start off from, and then how is it, I guess, evolving right now that things are changing, and what happened to that in the pandemic? Did it go back to doing just call center, or did divergent type of industries coming here to do business?
Okay. So I've been doing this for 10 years, right? For over 10 years. I mean, not just with EnterPH, which is almost 6 years old, uh, almost 7 years old, but with another company as well. And throughout that span of over 10 years, I've noticed that there is really this evolution when it
Mhm.
comes to to companies coming into the Philippines. So sure, you have your bread and butter, which would be, low level. Not I would Okay, you're right. I shouldn't say low level. Entry level, or more basic outsourcing functions. But then a lot of the companies become repeat customers, or they kind of preach the gospel along the way when they notice, hey, Filipinos aren't just good English speakers. They are
Mhm.
highly trainable. So I can take a Filipino uh, call center employee, and because of the grit and the drive that they innately have, I can mold them to learn a new skill that they can apply somewhere else, right? And it's also a function of our higher than average college graduate turnout, right? So we do have more college graduates than what I guess is the world median, right? And because of that, a lot of more Filipinos are highly educated and thus susceptible to learning or upskilling their current skill set.
Rox,
So because of all of that,
yeah.
yeah,
No, please,
it's evolved,
please
right?
continue. Okay, we've
Yeah.
evolved.
So now during the pandemic, uh, there is this need now. There's a global need for highly skilled workers, and I guess fortunately for us, it's really expensive to find this talent back in the home countries of Western countries, etc. And they are now looking to the Philippines, where they can get 95 to 100% of the output, sometimes even more, for a very competitive price, right? And they're not hamstrung by things like, uh, I don't know, unreasonable requests from employees. That's the
Mm.
feedback that I get, right?
I guess. I guess coming from a Western culture, especially, then you come to. I mean, the way that they have Western,
Yeah.
I guess, employment practices is quite different from Philippine employment practices in terms of the
Yeah.
relationship between management and the employee.
Hmm. Yes. And because the government has actually taken great strides to make things a bit easier. So uh, now it's a lot easier to incorporate a company. It is now easier to open bank accounts. It's starting to become, even the infrastructure that's supporting these new companies coming in, it's starting to develop. Yeah.
Rocky, if you were to take a look at, let's say, for example, the clients who've been coming in, we've been talking about, well, BPOs is just the low hanging fruit that we are aware of.
Yes.
Can you help us also better understand? Because there are other industries there that are coming into the country, which are interesting, where a lot of them are competency or skills based. I know that there's things like knowledge process outsourcing, there is legal
Hmm.
outsourcing now, things that don't just require a command of the English language. What are these other things that you've seen coming into the country in terms of these different outsourcing jobs, no?
Right.
And then have they increased also during this pandemic?
They definitely have. No, in fact, I'm trying to actually, I'm trying to remember a client in the past year or so that has come here solely for voice work. Everything is more back office, IT development, software development, um, even consultancy based services.
Really?
So
Wow.
we are definitely moving up the value chain in terms of the work that is being required from Filipinos. Not only are we looking at the outsourcing industry, countries are starting to notice that the Philippines is itself a market for their goods and services. 100 and what's our last count? 130 million people, 120 million people,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
110. About 110.
110 million people. That's a pretty big market, right? So we are there people are noticing we are the most, despite our difficulties in actual connection, we are the social media capital of the world. So other countries are looking to see that as a valuable resource, right? Um, and I'm sure your household, as well as millions of other households across the Philippines, e-commerce is now the thing. So, and all of the other industries that are aligned with that. So you have last mile logistics, you
Mm-hmm.
have um, uh, the development of these of tools and apps that facilitate the e-commerce experience. I mean, these are things that are starting to develop, and a lot of countries and a lot of companies in these countries are starting to take notice. So rather than just being used as a resource to service other markets, we are now becoming a market unto ourselves.
Yeah, it reminds me similarly of why people are looking. Indonesia is one of the hotspots right now for a lot of foreign investment and
Yeah,
venture capital because um, the population of 300 million people, right? You can't
yeah,
ignore a market that
absolutely,
big. So that's why
absolutely.
Indonesia's actually been growing by leaps and bounds, and it's been people are looking at it right here right now. Now going back to the Philippines, also Rocky, what have you seen also in terms of it being different? I know because before people used to think BPOs, those are large scale companies, but actually you're seeing that it's not just the large companies that are coming here. In fact, these are some even medium scale or just 1 to 2 people, or in the parlance of the call center, mga 1 to 2 seats lang yan. What are you seeing naman there? Are we getting also smaller companies who also want to do cost savings, or smaller companies who want to leverage on our talent? What are you seeing how it's evolving right now in terms of people who want to, or investors who want to come to the Philippines to leverage our cost savings and our talent?
I would even go so far as to say, RJ, that it is even more crucial for the small to medium enterprises abroad to be able to find savings anywhere they can. So they seem to be a lot more aggressive now than some of these larger companies, right? And usually the larger companies are already here in one respect or another. It's really the small and medium companies that they need to account for um, every shilling, every cent, every yen, and and it is that need that draws them to the Philippines, and to actually make them more aggressive into opening, yes, 1 to 2 people shops, right? 5, 10 people, and the again, because we have taken strides, we're not quite there yet, but we're slowly improving. Work from home is now becoming very viable, especially in the big cities around Metro Manila,
Mhm,
as well as
mhm.
Cebu and Davao, and some of the other major city centers across the Philippines. So we're getting there. We just need to, keep our foot on the pedal, and not let up.
Having said that, no, aside from these companies that are setting up, these are the smaller companies you said that need 1 to 2 seats to leverage on those things. How about also when you look at startup type companies? When I talk about startup, I'm talking about tech startup companies. Are they
Mm.
also looking at the Philippines? Because admittedly, sometimes uh, our laws aren't the best for startups to put up here,
Yeah,
but the talent is here definitely to you have a longer runway for your pre-seed or Series A, Series B
yeah,
money to
yeah,
stretch out.
yeah,
Tell us a bit more
yeah.
about your experience also with working with the startup industry.
Okay,
Are they coming here?
okay. So most of this is really just because of my experience in the startup community.
Mm-hmm.
So I by no means claim to be an expert in this area, right? But I do keep my ear to the ground. And really, the biggest hurdle for startups in the Philippines is its infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
We just do not offer as much as some of our neighbors do. Some of our neighbors, right? We don't offer enough incentives. We don't offer enough protection. We There have been some initiatives which are very good, like the startup law that was passed. We had that sandbox experiment
Mm-hmm.
in
Cagayan?
Bataan, in Cagayan, yes. But we need more, right? It's not a small thing that we are the first country in the world to have the government formally recognize crypto
Mm.
exchanges. So what that tells me is that it can be done, right? You just need the will to do it, and maybe a little longer view thinking.
Okay. Having said all this, Rocky, so let's go back into the idea of what's been happening this pandemic. You've seen that maybe midway through the pandemic, companies were coming here because they wanted to leverage cost savings. More importantly, now because of what's happening, and but now that things seem to be approaching a new status, diba? A new normal. There's a certain new normal going on where they are recovering already in the more developed countries. Um, what's happening right now? How have things changed significantly, or what are the type of foreign businesses still coming here to leverage on our talent and on cost savings? Has it changed so far, or is it improving? Is it decreasing?
So this year's actually been pretty interesting. Uh, so normally January is pre-pandemic, January has always been kind of a slow time for our business because most countries they're just starting to make their plans for the year, and then we start feeling increase around maybe in a couple of weeks, middle of February until about mid-March, and then
Mhm.
things start to build up and moving towards to Q2, Q3, and then that last push for Q4. But oddly enough, in January, we've closed probably the most number of clients that we have done
Wow.
on a January in 5 years. I think we're still at that stage where companies are now becoming more, um, uh, becoming more cognizant of the need to have some of their services offshore here, so they can utilize their people and maximize their use back in their home countries. So again, no, this is something that we should take advantage of now, right? And I believe that this trend might even continue still towards the end of 2022, right? Because
Were these
things
companies
are looking up, but not quite yet.
that are currently patronizing your services in EnterPH, are these companies who considered the Philippines even before the pandemic, or considered the Philippines as a result of this pandemic?
Many of them actually have said that we already had plans to come to the Philippines. It's just that 2020, 2021, we kind of had to put everything on hold, because people were putting out fires everywhere
Mhm.
back at home, and they had to kind of um, regroup before making that push to the Philippines. Because as I'm sure we'll discuss in a bit, there are changes to be made, and there are adjustments to be made when you're setting up a business in a country that you're probably not familiar with.
That's right. And Rox, having said all this one, I think let's move into more. You're talking about companies coming in and wanting to come in now, and this goes into the heart of what EnterPH is all about. We often talk about having that entrepreneurial mindset where you figure out what problem are you trying to solve when you put up a business. And like you said, you were in the industry for the past 10 years, even before putting up EnterPH. But you did see an opportunity. I know right now that there are many large companies that come over here, and they need and you by background you are a lawyer, so I mean they can go to large companies. Why come to EnterPH? What niche did you find in that sort of industry of foreign businesses coming to the country that you said, this looks like something that could be a viable, scalable, sustainable business?
Okay, so I think it's because of the mindset that and when I say we, I'm talking about you and I and the other partners. We have brought, we have made our consultancy more business minded and more entrepreneur, and to be able to do our business with the entrepreneur in mind, right? One of the challenges for a lawyer like myself is that we are very, very risk averse. And whenever we see a situation, we're always looking for potential problems and, yes, of course, how to solve them. But more often than not, our default advice is to avoid it entirely. And for the most part, that gets in the way of business. So I've come into this with the mindset that I need to be able to provide real world practical solutions for my clients. So, and they appreciate that, right? They appreciate that I am just not getting in their way, or I am not uh, their Jiminy Cricket, and I always have to be the one to tell them, no, you can't do this. No. Uh, so, and through the years, and along the way, I've picked up certain things that we can do, all within the bounds of the law, that would be able to service um, our clients better, right? And I think right now what we're trying to do is uh, we're trying to grow that into an experience that's scalable. So that's really my big thing for this year. How I can translate that on a larger scale.
Yeah, and Rox, the interesting thing that I'm also seeing, in your growth as a legal entrepreneur, I would say, because first you really just look at, we can make sure that we prepare your entry to the country legally, but aside from that one, you also started spotting other pain points that they experience, because I mean, just legally setting up is one issue, but it's also the other parts, like, how do I set up? Where do I find the people? Or let's say, for example, I don't need all these services. I just need this one particular service. Or, for example, can it be something like, lock, stock, and barrel, take care of everything, and I just come in and it's plug and play? Tell us a bit more
Yeah.
about how you came up with these other services that surround EnterPH.
Okay. So what we've done is, we have partnered with a lot of like-minded firms that are specialists at what they do. So we've imagined, you and I, RJ, we've imagined EnterPH as the hub with all of these allied firms and other consultancies as spokes on our wheel, right? So we become the entry point. We become the initial and sometimes only point of contact for our clients. And then I try to figure out, or the staff tries to figure out what they need, and then we make those connections, right? While we do make those connections, we still become the primary point of contact, and then we manage that experience for our clients. So
So,
that is what I'm trying to. I think that is the one innovation that we might have over other companies of our um, uh, in
you
our
do.
industry,
Oh,
right?
that's right.
Rather than try to build everything in house, which is fine. I mean, if you have the resources to do that, then good on you. But if you're not able to build up those resources, then, or you're not able to take care of every aspect of those businesses well, then even the aspects of the business that are doing well tend to suffer, because clients tend to only remember the bad experiences, not they remember the bad experiences more than the good, right? Which is why, so rather than try to build an accounting department or a bookkeeping department in house, because I'm not an accountant, I'm not a CPA, neither are any of the partners. I would rather work with a well-established firm
Mhm.
that can do all of that. And because of the conversations we've had with the partner in charge there, they know what we're about. They know the experience that we're trying to deliver. And so far they have done that, right? And we do that across all of the other consultancies we're partnered with. Yeah. And even in some that we believe in so much, EnterPH does take even an equity stake in those companies, right?
That's right. That's right. I know that there's one even that we had a conversation with, what they're looking into is really a literal build, operate, transfer, because many of them, they go to us, I want to put up a call center, but I don't know how to start it off. And you say, and
Yeah.
there's some, solving the pain point. We find partners to help them build, operate, transfer a whole call center. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Okay, so that's something that we've been developing for the past couple of years, right? Where we're going to find we have been trying to find a way to be able to do just that, where you have a client that has an immediate need for for uh, for a number of people to populate a certain office, etc. And we put together the resources necessary to build that, and then just turn the key over to them once they're
Mhm.
ready to come in. Now, of course, there's a new challenge now because of the pandemic. People are not able, and sometimes now not willing, to go to the office every single day or go to a facility. So while we do have the pieces in place, I think right now that's kind of on hold because everything has to. It's all a matter of timing, right? I don't think it would be best if we release that sort of a solution when there are really no takers. Um,
Okay.
and it also is a reflection of how the nature of work is evolving, right? We can definitely move that build, operate, and transfer into such a way where we're setting up, individual workstations in somebody's houses, in people's houses, right?
Understand.
So that's something that we can tweak over the next few months.
And Rox, this goes back to, I guess this is like I would say incorporation basics, but many people don't understand these type of things, which is very important. When they look at the Philippines in terms of opportunity, that um, there are actually different ways that foreigners can come into the country and set up a business. And it's not just a corporation. For
Mhm.
those who are looking at the Philippines here right now, if they are purely foreigners or maybe foreigners of Filipino descent, how should they look at the Philippines? What are the different legal, I guess, entities that they can enter here
Yeah.
into the
Well,
Philippines as?
that's really, yeah, that's kind of technical, na RJ. If you don't mind, I would rather, if you don't mind, RJ, sige, I'll just take a very quick,
Sure, please, please.
I'll just take just So yeah, in the Philippines, we do have several business entities that you can have as vehicles for your business. So you have the corporation, a partnership, sole proprietorship, a branch office, a regional headquarters, regional operating headquarters, a representative office. So we do have options for many of our foreign uh, friends who want to set up their businesses here. But I think one thing that I need to dispel is
Hmm.
this notion, and it's held not only by foreigners but by many Filipinos
Hmm.
as well, that every business has to be owned by the majority of the business
Majority owned
has
by
to be owned
Filipino.
by a Filipino, right? That's simply not true. There are businesses that foreigners can own 100% of the business. And there are rules in place for that. But I guess the quick answer is yes, foreigners can wholly own their businesses. And definitely in a BPO setting, that is the case. They can own and operate their businesses 100% um, under their ownership. Okay, we do have a list of industries, and it's usually compiled in the foreign investment negative list, where there are hard equity caps or foreigners when they want to own businesses, in particular nationalized industries. And I guess the reason why a lot of Filipinos think that businesses have to be owned by Filipinos is because retail, which is maybe what, more than 50% of
Yes.
of all the businesses in the country,
Hmm.
is wholly nationalized, right? With very few exceptions. But for the most part, it's wholly nationalized, meaning only Filipinos can own those businesses.
That's right. But then,
So, yeah.
continue, please.
Go ahead. No, that's it.
Yeah. No, I was saying, but so that's very interesting. So that there are many ways really for foreigners to come and do business here in the Philippines. But we also have right now that there's been how do you see things going right now that the Congress just signed to, just is going to be presenting the law to the president here right now, where they allowed more industries to be open to foreign investment, almost 100% foreign investment. Do you think that you'll see an inflow of more foreign investors here, not just in the main industry, but allied industries to that industry that is being opened up?
Yes. So it's a very controversial bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because there is context to it, which I won't get into. It's there are a lot of good arguments on either side, but I think as a general proposition, right? I don't think that opening up a lot of these key industries to foreign direct investment is necessarily a bad thing. I know that may sound very controversial in light of the context that we're currently in, right? Where there is a supposed Chinese influx or Chinese invasion from mainland China. Um, and while I do see the point, I do see where they're coming from. You can't close off one opportunity just because it is rife for abuse by a very, very small sector of the population. And case in point, so you mentioned telecommunications, which is one of those industries that this law intends to open up to foreign direct investment. Uh, I'll ask you, RJ, out of the over 100, almost 180 countries in the world, how many countries do you think um, allow 100% ownership in telecommunications?
Well, that's a good
While
question. Yeah. Let's say 100, maybe.
100?
Yeah.
Okay. So, based on the data that I've gotten from the World Bank on telecommunications alone, there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's call it 20. There are only 20 countries now left in the world that do not allow
Allow for foreigners.
100% ownership. I'm not even talking about majority. We're talking about 100% ownership. There are
Mm-hmm.
only about 20 countries in the world that do not allow 100% ownership in telecommunications. And out of that 20, over half of them allow majority ownership. There are only less than 10 countries in the world that do not allow uh, majority ownership in telecommunications. And in this area, there are only two countries in the world that um, are more restrictive. So currently, foreigners can own 40% in a telecommunications business. There are only two countries left in the world that allow for a smaller percentage, and that's Malaysia and Ethiopia. So
Mm.
uh, I guess that's a bit telling, right? Where we need to move with the rest of the world, right? And it's an easy cop out to say that, right, just because something is prone to abuse, then we should just avoid it entirely. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a little heavy-handed, right? And that really does stifle innovation. It stifles, you know, trying to do what's right for the country just because we don't want to get abused again.
Got
So,
that. Yeah.
of course, it's easier said than done, but there are mechanisms in place to make sure that abuse does not happen. Right?
And with that, Rocky, moving on a bit, no? I want to
Mhm.
look at now hopefully 2022 is a better year. The year of the tiger is looking so far pretty optimistic. And I want to talk about opportunities now. And the first opportunity I want to talk about is, what do you think are the emerging opportunities really within that sphere of business process outsourcing or outsourcing industries? What do you think many more of these foreign investors will come in here? What opportunities do they see as ripe for them to leverage our strengths here in the Philippines?
Okay. I do think that there is a good opportunity when it comes to uh, services around customer experience. and I'm not just talking about tech support
Mhm.
and call center. When I say customer experience, is we do have a very robust group of designers for UI and UX. We are looking at, because we are so ingrained in social media and
Mhm.
apps, and you know we have created this, unknowingly or unwittingly, have created a group of people that do have very good opinions and the skills to match, in order to create apps and to define and redefine customer experience. So that's one. Another thing that I see is anything that has to do with other experiences like tourism. So tourism is really bad now worldwide, granted, but I think we are going to be experiencing a huge rebound when things open up. It's
Mhm.
probably taking longer than I thought it would, but
Revenge tourism.
I still think
Yeah.
I still think that when things open up, we're going to we're going to reap you know we're going to reap so many rewards if we're able to take advantage of that now. And I think we'll be able to, for our country, we will see that in 2 weeks when we completely open up our borders, right? So uh, I think by next week, foreigners who are normally visa free can already start coming into the country and experiencing tourism. So I think, and there are a lot of uh, areas of industries that are catering to provide that experience, maybe in a post pandemic sort of way.
What do you see now also as well, Rocky, in terms of the business opportunities here in the Philippines for Philippine companies, or to support sort of the growth of the BPO ecosystem? Because there should be some opportunities there. What do you see as emerging? Somebody who can help uh, put up remote work from home stations for call centers. What do you think is emerging for us to have the ecosystem of BPOs thrive?
Okay. This is something that needs to be done in conjunction with government, right? It's not just on the this does not just fall in the lap of private sector, government. These are things that we need to be able to work together in order to come up with better solutions or better opportunities for our foreign investor friends. So on the private side, I think it's opening up, being able to provide better services when it comes to the infrastructures that will make these businesses grow. Better connectivity, uh, better facilities, easier access to equipment. So these are things that need, the intervention of the private sector. Hopefully, um, if they have the opportunity, the resources to grow these areas, then I think we should be able to service our foreign investors better. On the government side, my suggestion is to really take a look at our current system of incentives. Um, while we are incentivizing companies by giving them tax breaks, that's all well and good, but a lot of countries are actually giving something, either uh, free or subsidized electricity. You know, um, so the government should really make it a priority to uh, to look at foreign investment as something good, right? And I think most importantly, there has to be a shift in the mindset of your average Juan de la Cruz, that foreign investment should not be equated to an invasion or uh, colonialism of one sort or another, right? It's really just the way the world works now. I mean, countries are opening up their borders for foreign investment, and uh, we have to be able to take advantage of all of that, or we will be left behind, right?
Mhm.
And we see. examples everywhere where a country is able to maintain and preserve their cultural heritage, their cultural identity, despite the fact that there are so many companies from around the world that are investing in them. One prime example would be Vietnam, right? I think they have been very successful in preserving their cultural identity.
Hmm.
Same with Thailand, maybe even Malaysia, Indonesia. I think it can be done. It's again, it's just a matter of having that mindset where we do live in a very very small world, and it's unfortunate if we live in such a way where we carve ourselves out of that world.
Rocky, as we begin to start wrapping up this discussion, as you know, the podcast is something that people listen to not just here in the Philippines, but
Sure.
other parts of the world as well. And for the companies that want to come in here in the Philippines that are interested to set up, if this is a best chance for you to sort of give them some advice now. What are the usual faux pas that they make coming into the Philippines, and what can they do to make sure that they don't fall into the same traps, or those problems when they come and set up business in
Yeah.
the Philippines. Please go ahead. If you were
Okay.
talking to a client right now, giving them advice, what advice would you be
Yeah.
giving them here
So
right now?
my best advice is that do not look at the Philippines uh, as a place where you're just saving your money, right? You have to look at the Philippines as a place where we can provide so much value for the most reasonable price that you are going to come here even if cost was not an option, because we do provide that value, and we do provide exceptional work for that will be of credit to any company around the world. Okay. So I always tell my clients that if you're looking for cheapest place around, we're not for you,
Mhm.
right? And I think once you've reoriented them that way, then they start to open up their eyes and their ears to just what we have to offer. So for me, that is always the best advice that I give my clients, right? Um, I I tell them upfront that yes, there are certain challenges, but it's all worth it. There are challenges when it comes to bureaucracy. There are challenges when it comes to the physical aspect of doing business here. But when you talk to, I've rarely come across an expat that does not like the Philippines, by and large, right? They may not like certain aspects of it, but on the whole, they love it when they're here.
Okay.
Okay. And I think that is, uh, that's on the business side. And for those expats that are thinking of coming here to the Philippines, um, and expecting to go to the office during the day and then have drinks by the beach towards sunset, uh, Manila, that's not Manila. So we always foreigners tend to have
Notion.
this concept of Manila, that they can come in and work during the day and then they can lounge around the beachside, you know, towards the end of that day. That's not Manila. You can try Cebu for that.
And it's great that your wife is from Cebu. So exactly, there's a great place in Cebu waiting for them as well. So nice.
Absolutely.
And Rocky, aside from that one, what can they also expect in terms of when they come over here, in terms of well, when I say legally setting up the company, what are the mistakes that they might make sometimes that you can say, okay, this time if you come to the Philippines, make sure that when you set up a company, it should be this way, so that it's to your benefit and you don't get into any sort of
Yeah.
longer term legal
Okay.
predicaments.
My best advice really is please, please, please talk to somebody. Doesn't necessarily, I mean, hopefully it's us, but talk to somebody who really does have knowledge of these things. Um, because again, there is that huge misconception that every business has to be 60/40. I think that is really the source of a lot of the initial mistakes of for companies that I've worked with. There is a lot of bad advice out there, and I don't mean it to say that there's a lot of bad advice for nefarious purposes. It's really just born out of not being familiar with the intricacies of the way that our laws and regulations are set up, right? So take advantage of all of the facilities in being able to get, good, sound advice that is really backed up by, you know, uh, by law. Right? So for me, that is the best advice that I could give any potential, uh, you know, any person, any potential client out there, or any potential company that's seeking to do business in the Philippines. Do your research, really.
They can also check out our website. The website is www.enterph.com. It's flashing on the screen here right now. Now, now, Rocky. Also, when you say this one, when they come to the country, of course, I mean, there's challenges, but there are also incentives. What are the incentives that you're finding that they should come in here? That is both government and, I guess, non-government. Like, what are the perks of doing of living and working in the Philippines versus, I guess, other countries where you could be also an expat in a BPO.
Okay, let's talk about government incentives. So, government incentives right now, if you're in certain areas of development in certain industries, particularly the export, which BPOs qualify under, if you're of a certain size, you are given tax breaks, right? It's a whole system, but basically, you are relieved of the burden of paying income taxes for a number of years. And even after you are given the benefit of a preferential tax rate, right? So that, and an easier, you know, process when it comes to getting a visa, a work visa. So that helps. Um, and hopefully, when there are local incentives for small and medium or micro businesses, uh, companies might want to take a look into that to see if they qualify. But most of the incentives really is if you live here, uh, like I was alluding to earlier, the expat life is probably one of the best in the world. Uh, and
What
that's
is,
not my opinion. That's the opinion I get from a lot of my clients who have expats here.
we could be jaded because we live here, no? But then what did they find? I mean, what did they tell you? What they like most about the Philippines? I know you were telling me, we were stuck in Boracay during the earlier part of January. That you actually had a client who was living in Boracay, who chose to live in
Yeah,
Boracay.
yeah. So I think definitely their salary goes a lot longer here, right? Um, and the good thing about having a country that is extremely English, proficient in English, is that the period of adjustment is shortened tremendously. That is really one of the um, biggest hurdles when it comes to adjusting to a life abroad, right? Being able to communicate with the locals. Our culture is, for better or for worse, is largely Western as well. So it's not unfamiliar to Westerners to come here and slide into society in the Philippines. So you actually do have, unlike other countries where expats tend to cling together, you actually have a group of expats here that are out and about and making friends with locals, and actually building good relationships with a lot of locals, probably more so than um, in other countries.
Got that.
So
And Rocky, one more thing what always comes up, as we start to wrap up this discussion, also is that expectation in terms of how it's like to work with Filipinos, I guess, versus, I mean, people coming here with a Western mindset. I know we've had these conversations in the past when we were speaking to some of the principals, that they realize that, the mindset here is not the same as the work mindset in other countries. Can you just help them better understand, so that when they come here, they don't get to a culture shock when it comes to working Filipinos.
So Filipinos are very non-confrontational, I think, by and large, right? And when I say non-confrontational, it's more of Filipinos just really aim to please. So Filipinos will hardly say no to anything, even if they cannot do it, right? Because Filipinos are not used to confrontation or to telling people no, right? Of course, this is a generalization, but I think one of the biggest adjustments is more interpersonal, where our friendliness and our demeanor of being eager to please sometimes can get in the way of work that's being done, because Filipinos need to be a bit more assertive when it comes to the work environment, especially when they're dealing with somebody perceived to be a superior. So for me, that is the largest cultural disconnect, or the largest the root of a lot of the interpersonal conflicts that expats may have with Filipinos.
Okay. And having said that, Rock, thanks so much for your time. As we start to wrap up, for businesses outside looking at the Philippines as a potential investment hub or an outsourcing hub, let's just distill all the advice you were giving. If you're going to put it down into 3 to 5 bullet points, why the Philippines?
We are a very good value proposition. You will definitely get your money's worth when you work with Filipinos, and there's nothing like being in the Philippines.
And with that, thank you so much, Attorney Rocky Chan of EnterPH. If you're interested to work together with EnterPH, either as a client or as a fellow in our hub and spoke model, where you can help support the growth of the BPO ecosystem, please get in touch with us again. Our website is www.enterph.com. Again, thanks so much. We will see you next week for the next RJ Ledesma podcast. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.